Most liquid culture recipes are missing one key ingredient, and it completely changes how your culture grows. I tested a few of the most common recipes side by side, and the results weren't even close. This one grew fast, strong, and pretty clear, and this is what everything else looked like. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what your liquid culture is missing and the foolproof recipe I now use every time. When I first started messing around with liquid culture, I just kind of used whatever recipes I found on Reddit, and truth be told, they all work. But the more I watched and used them, I learned that they didn't all quite work the same. So many different recipes can work because if you add mycelium into sugar water, you're gonna get growth, assuming that you kept everything sterile. So the difference among liquid culture recipes here isn't necessarily about success or failure, it's more so about everything around it. How fast it goes, how thick it gets, that sounds weird, and how easy it is to spot contamination. Those are the key factors that make the recipe matter a lot more than most people might think. So in an effort to optimize my current liquid culture, I tested 5 different recipes involving honey, light malt extract, a couple hybrid variations, and maybe a mystery variation or two. For the sake of consistency, I use the same ratios, the same environment, the same culture, and the same technique across all the jars. Now, before I tell you the winning recipe, let me explain what challenges I was trying to overcome with my current liquid culture. Light malt extract has been sort of my default go-to recipe for a while. 500 milliliters of water, 10 grams light malt extract. It's super simple, it's super easy, it has a lot of nutrition so the mycelium can grow well, but it's not without problems of its own. The biggest of those problems being that it will make your liquid culture pretty dark, like a deep, dark amber color. And with liquid culture, so much of our diagnosis is based on visual signs. With a darker culture, it's easier for contaminants that create maybe a little bit of haze or off coloring of the mycelium to really hide and go unnoticed. In my experience, light malt extract also leaves a fair amount of sediment along the bottom, which can further sort of obfuscate my view of the mycelium. And my last difficulty with light malt extract is dealing with the formation of islands, those clumps of mycelium floating on the surface of your liquid culture. I know this can happen with any sort of medium, and people are going to tell me I need to swirl my jars more, and I promise you I swirl them a lot. None of my other jars ever developed these islands. It's only something I've experienced with light malt extract, and that just makes it tougher when it comes time to pull the liquid culture into my syringes. Now, honey on the other hand is like the opposite end of the spectrum from light malt extract. Honey with nothing else added creates an absolutely crystal clear solution. You can see any and everything going on in there. The problem with honey is it doesn't have a very diverse nutrient profile, so mycelial growth can be a little bit slower and less aggressive. Another problem with my past liquid cultures is the ratio, and this applies regardless of which sugar you're using. If the solution becomes too rich, which basically means too much sugar for the given amount of water we're using, that can create an environment that will more easily allow contaminants to take hold. So if you get the balance wrong and do extra sugar, you're not going to be creating faster growth. You're just going to be making your liquid culture more likely to contaminate. More sugar is not always better. Without further ado, after testing all these different combinations and ratios, this was my winner. Per 1 quart mason jar, I use 600 milliliters of distilled water, 12 grams of honey, and half a gram of peptone. That's it. It's a simple enough recipe that gives me really fast, strong growth while keeping the solution nice and clear for me to spot any potential contaminants. Now, there's a little more nuance to it than just dropping the ingredients in the jar and pressure cooking it, so I'm gonna give a little bit more of a detailed process in just a moment. Like I mentioned earlier, honey on its own will grow a little bit slower and weaker than light malt extract because it doesn't have that diverse nutrient profile. This is where peptone comes into play. By adding that tiny half a gram to each jar, it fills the nutrient gaps that honey is missing. For those who don't know, by the way, peptone is basically just a partially digested protein, so it adds some nitrogen and amino acids to the mixture. And as an added bonus, it even smells like old eggs. When I tried adding the peptone to light malt extract, it didn't really change a whole lot because light malt extract, it already has a lot of nutrients to it. But when I added it to honey, it resulted in way faster and explosive growth. And it remained pretty clear, which is why the honey peptone combo is my winner. The process for making it is mostly straightforward. By the way, everything that I'm using in this video today, from supplies to cultures to helpful resources, are going to be linked in the description down below. So we want to start with 600 milliliters of distilled water in a 1-quart jar. I like to microwave it slightly to get it warm, and then I'm going to add my 12 grams of honey and half gram of peptone. Be careful not to overdo the peptone here, or it's going to destroy that clarity that we get from the honey. Half a gram is a surprisingly small amount, so I like to weigh it out with my milligram scale, but if you feel confident, you could probably just eyeball it. Don't quote me on this, but if I had to guess, I would say it's probably about 1/6 of a teaspoon. After I add the ingredients, I like to throw in a magnetic stir bar. It's optional, but when it comes time down the road to draw our culture into syringes, the magnetic stir bars can do a lot to break up the mycelium and make that process way easier. Mix everything up, put on your fancy lid, and then cover the lid with foil. Then we're going to sterilize these at 15 psi for 25 minutes. More time at sterilization isn't going to be better here. If you go too long, you're going to caramelize the sugars in your liquid culture, and it's going to create that dark haze that we're trying to avoid. Once your 25 minutes is up, turn off your heating element and just let the jars cool down in the pressure cooker overnight. Once the jars have completely cooled, you're free to inoculate them with an agar wedge or a couple milliliters of clean liquid culture. Now, inoculating jars kind of comes with its own specific rule set, and I've done a video outlining that exact process in detail, so I'm not really going to talk about it here, but that will be linked down below as well if you want to check it out. After inoculation, you're not going to see much for the first few days, but I can almost guarantee that's not going to stop you from checking those jars 10 times a day. If you can, try to swirl the jars once or twice a day to help spread everything out and prevent the mycelium from clumping up. Once you hit the 3 or 4 day mark, you're likely to see little blobs forming in the bottom of the jars. This is exactly what we want to see, and that's our mycelium getting started. With clear solutions like honey, it's going to be super easy to spot right away. If you use something with sediment like light malt extract, you're going to have a little bit of a tougher time, but you will start to see that kind of bubble forming in the middle. From there, the mycelium should keep growing over the next 2 weeks at room temperature. What you want to be looking for here is like a white, wispy growth. It'll almost look kind of like a cloud. When you stir it, it's going to create kind of a haze and maybe not look like all that much, but when it settles, it's going to look like a nice, bubbly, cloudy, sort of white mass in your jar. If you're seeing any weird colors or haziness, that's a sign that something probably went wrong, but I know since you're following this video, you're not going to encounter that. Now, in my experience, around the 2-week mark is where the mycelium really starts to slow down, and we can go ahead and throw these jars in the fridge to extend their life. I know people are going to ask, because I get this question in the comments a lot, how long are my jars safe to use? And I say for optimum results, try to use them within a few months. However, I've personally had success using liquid culture that sat in the fridge for a year, and I'm sure other people have had success going much longer than that. Your mileage may vary depending on genetics, your recipe, your refrigerator temperature. There's just too many factors and variables at play to give an exact timeline. Once again, I want to briefly cover some of the common mistakes that people don't even realize are mistakes. The first thing is over-sterilizing. Once again, we don't want to pass that 25-minute mark. When I was new to mushroom growing, I was over-sterilizing all my spawn bags and spawn jars and substrate bags and everything I could, and that's fine. You can't really over-sterilize that stuff, but you can absolutely over-sterilize your culture and caramelize the sugars, and it's not a good thing, and it's going to make your whole liquid culture way more difficult to work with. Once you hit 15 psi, just set that 25-minute timer and you're going to be fine. The second mistake is making the mixture too rich. 12 grams per 600 milliliters of water is plenty. That gives us a nice healthy 2% solution, and just keep it there. The third mistake is not swirling the jar. If you inoculate this liquid culture jar and then leave it to sit for a few weeks, you're going to come back to some giant clump of mycelial mass that you're never going to be able to break up. It's going to be a pain to pull into syringes, and you'll have just wasted your time and resources. Like I said, I like to swirl those jars once or twice a day, but at a bare minimum, do it at least every other day. Even once my cultures are finished colonizing and I'm storing them in the fridge, I still pull them out once a week to swirl them and just mix everything up. If you can avoid those 3 mistakes, you should be good to go here. At the end of the day, all these recipes that I tested will work. It's just a matter of what is optimum. And for me, optimum was the honey mixed with a little bit of peptone to give it a strong growth and still just keep everything clear. If you can master this process, you can effectively turn 2 milliliters of liquid culture into unlimited liquid culture. So you can grow all the mushrooms and run all the weird little experiments that you want. If you're ready to get started and make your own liquid culture now, I recommend first checking out this video over here that will detail the common mistakes people make when trying to inoculate a jar. Thanks for watching and happy growing.